Hello and welcome to the UDK Special Effects and Particles tutorial. Today I'll be showing you how you can use the UDK particle effect system called Cascade and how you can make your own fire particle effect, complete with sparks, smoke, heat distortion, and along with that we'll be finishing up making some rain and converting that rain into snow as well. So to start off, we're going to make some animated fire. And to do that, we're going to need a selection of various fire textures. We're going to use cgtextures.com to get those resources. So just open up your web browser now and head to cgtextures.com. Now this is a free site. They provide thousands of excellent textures, and it's been used by AAA companies all over the world. Some of these textures have been used in games such as Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, and it's constantly being updated with more, so it's a great resource, especially for indie developers like myself. Unfortunately though, you have to make an account before you can download the textures, so what you'll need to do is go to a random texture, click on it, and it will provide you with a prompt asking you to create an account. Just follow the instructions. You'll just need an email address. It's completely free and easy. It shouldn't take that long. Once you've finished making an account, just head back to the home page, and what we're looking for is this fire category here. So just click on fire and it'll bring up some amazing texture resources. The one we want is flames. We might be using fireworks later, and smoke as well possibly, but for now we just want flames. So click on flames, and we've got an amazing amount of fantastic flame photos. And what we're looking for is several photographs of a flame in action. Just make sure that it's not clipping off the edge. You want to make sure that the whole fire is centered and there are black borders. Otherwise we're going to have to do extensive photoshopping, and we don't want to have to do that. So just go through and pick the ones you want. You feel free to make any kind of fire that appeals to you. You could make a candle lit fire, you could make a magic fire. Just make sure that the ones you choose sort of relate to each other in some way. Otherwise your fire will look a bit out of control. So you can see here I've put together quite a few fire textures. I won't be using all of them. For this tutorial we'll just be using probably about 4 or so. So now I'll show you how you can take the textures from CG Textures and turn them into full textures with alpha channels and everything you need to make it work in the particle effect. So once you have chosen a fire photo that you wish to use, just click on it and download I'd say the smallest version, but it's really up to you what kind of size you want to use. So I'm gonna use the small. And keep in mind as well, most of these photos have sets along with them, and sets are great because it basically provides you with a full library of flame photos that were all taken together. So it's the same flame in different states. And that's going to make your particle effect look really good if you use photos from the same fire. So just go ahead and open up Photoshop if you haven't already, and once that's loaded you can drag and drop this your fire texture into Photoshop, and now we can start playing around with it and basically make sure that it's completely ready to be used in the Unreal Engine. So the first thing we need to do is change the resolution of the texture to that of a value of the power of 2. And in this case we'll probably use 512 by 512. Now you can see here by default it's set to inches, And if we make this 512 by 512 inches, that's going to be a really large document. So it's really important that we change this to pixels. 512 width by 512 height. Hit OK. And there we go. We've got a 512 by 512 texture that the Unreal Engine is going to accept. Now the next thing to do is make an alpha channel. And what the alpha channel is going to do is basically specify which areas of the texture will be shown and which areas will be hidden or see-through. So obviously we want the black to be see-through, so we can't see anything but the flame. And the flame is going to have, it's going to be a little bit see-through, but it's going to be gradual, and it's going to change up a bit where the brightness differs. So what we want to do first is just double click on the background layer, hit OK, and now we're going to duplicate this layer so we can make our alpha texture. Now you don't need any color in an alpha texture, so just go to Image, Adjustment and hit Desaturate, and then just play with the brightness a little bit until the flame is a bit more opaque. So we just want to make it a little bit brighter and add some contrast as well. There we go. So that's pretty much our alpha texture done now, so we can grab the selection tool and select the whole image, go up to Edit, go Copy. We can hide this for now, and now we need to go into Channels and hit this this button down here that will create an alpha channel. And now we can paste the other layer into this alpha channel and chuck the RGB layers back on, and we've got our fire texture ready to use in the engine. So just go ahead and save your texture now, and you need to save it as a Targa or a TGA file. That's the format that the engine prefers. And make sure you export at 32 bits because that will bring along the alpha channel with it. If you export at 16 bits, that's only going to include grayscale with no color. 24 bits is RGB with color, and 32 bits is RGBA, which means color in alpha. Just hit OK. So just pop back into UDK now and open up your content browser. Let's go to Import and locate your TGA for your fire texture. Just import it. Now it's in the engine, so we can turn it into a material. Just right click in the browser, go to New Material. I'm just going to chuck it in as a texture sample. Hook it up to the diffuse, the specular and the emissive, because we want it to glow. Make sure as well that you change the blend settings, because we want to use the alpha channel, so we need to change it to blend translucent, and then we can hook the alpha channel up into the opacity slot, and there we go, we've got our fire sprite. So now we need to make an emitter object. So just right click and head to Particle System. And you can see it's already simulating a particle effect, shooting off these gizmos into the air. And what we're going to do is replace the default texture with our fire sprite. So just go back to the content browser, select your fire material, and when you click on required up here, it'll bring up this panel, and you can hit the arrow to put your fire texture in. There we go.
Looks really rough and harsh at the moment, but it's a good start. So there's lots of settings in Cascade that we can play around with. We can change the amount of sprites that it spawns. We can change the time at which they spawn, their size, position, velocity, and even color and alpha over lifetime. So if we play around, we can surely get something looking a bit more realistic. So to start off, let's just go to spawn. We're going to lower the rate at which they spawn. So let's try putting it to 5. It's looking a bit better. I'll try 4. Now remember, we're going to bring several more sprites in as extra emitters, and we're going to blend between them so we get some variance in the flame. So the next thing we want to do is to make the alpha blend over time, because at the moment the sprites are being spawned and then they'll just instantly disappear, and what we want to happen is for them to gradually fade out over time. So just jump back to your content browser, go into your fire material, and we're going to need to add in 2 multiply nodes. You can add them by holding M and clicking. And one multiplier is going to be for the emissive, and the other one will be for the opacity. As well, we should probably change the lighting model to, I believe it's unlit, as the particle systems prefer to use that lighting model. Now what we're going to do here is add in a vertex color node, and that's going to allow us to use vertex color as an input, so we can adjust color over life and alpha over life of the particle effect. That's going to allow us to blend that sprite in and out gradually, and also change the color of the fire if you want to over time. So just hook the alpha of the vertex color into the B slot of the second multiply, and we want the RGBA node from vertex color going into the B slot for the top multiplier. And now we can hook up the texture sample to the A nodes of multiply, and just hook the top one into emissive and the bottom one into opacity. And that's it. Now it's all ready for us to go in and change the values for alpha over time and color over time, thanks to this vertex color node. So we can hop back into Cascade now, and we want to go to the color over life node. Let's open up color, and you can see here we've got alpha over life, and what we want to do is add a curve. So we've got, by default, we've got 2 points here, 0 and 1. We want to add another one, so we've got 3 in total. And we're going to start with the out value being 0. So it starts off completely black. And then for the second node in the timeline here, we're going to change this to 0.5 and this to 1. So 0.5 meaning it's halfway through the timeline, and it'll be at full alpha strength. And then to finish it off, we want this to be at 1 to finish the timeline, and leave the out value at 0. So now it's fading in from black, going to full strength, and then fading out to black again. And it's a lot softer. Makes our particle effect look extremely better. Now that we have our sprite emitter working the way we want it to, we can go ahead and add in more sprites to add some variance to the overall flame animation. So using the process I showed you before in Photoshop, I've gone and created 3 more sprites that we can add into our emitter system. So just double click on your emitter, and now what we want to do is add another emitter system. So what we can do is right click and go to duplicate emitter. And now we've got a second emitter over here that we can edit the properties of. So we want to go back to required and then choose our second fire sprite. There we go. So we've now got two alternating fire sprites being generated from the emitters. Now we can start to play around with the velocity and the size to sort of get them blending a bit better together. So we'll start off changing the lifetime to something a bit shorter. So they're both at 1 second for minimum and max, and we want to have a little bit of random variation as well. So for our minimum, we might put 0.25. For our max, we'll put 0.5, and do that for the other one as well. Now our fire's moving a bit quicker, which is good. We could probably fiddle around with the size as well. So just go to initial size, and we'll change we want it to start off big, and then as it sort of weakens, it'll go smaller. So for minimum, we'll put 50, and for max, we'll put 100. And making sure that we adjust the other one as well. Now using duplicate again, we can go in and add the other fire sprites. And there we have it. We've got the 4 emitters in now with all 4 fire sprites working. And our fire particle effect is looking pretty good. It doesn't have any of the other features yet, such as sparks, smoke, or heat distortion, but it's a really good start. So we can now go back to our content browser, and with the emitter selected, we can right-click in the world and add it to the scene. And if we hit real time up here, or with Control R, we can initiate the particle effect and have a little preview of how it will look. So before moving on to the other effects, let's see if we can adjust our flame a bit and get it looking a bit nicer. What I might do is push the alpha over life curve forward a bit, and we'll also play around with the lifetime if we have to. So just go into your first color over life and go back to the alpha over life section and just find your tangent points. And what we want to do is change the middle one, which is 1, to 0.75, and we'll do that for all the other ones as well. So now that pop-in is a little less harsh, and it might be worth just giving it a little bit more time to do its cycle. So under lifetime, we'll just double the lifetime, so change the minimum to 0.5, max to 1, and do the same thing for all the other ones. And now we can pop back to the scene, and yeah, that's looking a lot better. So it's a really good start for our fire. Switch back to Photoshop and start a brand new document at 512 by 512 pixels. And what we're going to do straight off the bat, just down the bottom left here, hit this little icon, and that's going to make your colors black and white. And we're going to need that to make our cloud effect. So just go up into filter and go into render and go render clouds. And this is basically what we're using for our smoke. So to start off, we'll go to image and hit auto-tone. That's just going to increase the contrast a bit. So to make our alpha now, just go to layer, duplicate layer. And what we want to do is just darken around the borders. So we'll go to our paintbrush, grab a nice soft brush, make it really big. And with black as our color, and the opacity set to around 40, we can start to darken the edges until the edges are completely black. That's going to create a nice soft blend for our smoke sprite. So what we want to do now is select everything on the canvas, go copy, and we'll go to our channels panel here and create an alpha layer, and just go ahead and paste that data into place. Put our RGB back on, go back to layers, and we'll hide our alpha template. And now we've got our smoke texture ready to go. So we can save this as a TGA or a Targa. Making sure it's at 32 bits so it brings the alpha along with it. And we can import it into the engine now. So open up your content browser, hit import. And all we have to do is make a material for it. We could probably actually just copy one of our existing materials. We'll call it particle fire smoke mat. And after copying it, we just need to plug our smoke texture in. There we go. So with the smoke texture selected, we can jump back into the particle effect, and we'll just start off by copying one of our fire emitters, and we'll just try plugging the smoke texture in and see what happens. So you can see here something's clearly gone wrong. It doesn't seem to be picking up the alpha channel at all. So we'll have to investigate why that is. Seems I've made a critical error. I'm sending the RGBA channel into the opacity slot, when I should just be sending the opacity information into the opacity slot. So just grab the opacity node, which is the white one, from your texture sample, and plug it into A in the bottom multiplier. That should solve a lot of our problems. There we go. That's looking much better. We better change that for the fire sprites as well. They're also set up incorrectly. Oh, that one's set up fine. There we go. It's looking better now. So now that we've got our smoke texture, we can start playing around with the settings of the emitter to get it looking the way we want. So with the smoke, we want it to go up in the air and get larger and larger until it eventually fades out. So we can start by going to initial size, and we want to make it a bit smaller to start off with, so I'll change the minimum to 25 and the max to 50. Now because we want it to get larger over time, we're going to have to add in a size over time node. So just right click and go down to size and just hit size by life. And what we can do now is go into life multiplier, open up the constant curve, and you can see we've got 2 points here that we can sort of play around with. So this is very similar to the alpha over time. So we want to go to our second point, open up the out value and change this to 5. So you can see our smoke is getting really big. We might want to decrease that a bit, so change it to, we'll try 3. That's looking a bit better. It's way too rapid though, so what we want to do is go to lifetime and extend the lifetime of the smoke. We'll try putting in 1 and 2. That's actually not too bad. We'll have a look at how that looks in the scene. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good. What we also have to do now is change the position at which the smoke is spawned, because we don't want it to spawn directly on top of the flame. We want it to sort of appear just at the top. So we'll go into back into our emitter, and what we want to do is add a initial location node. That's going to allow us to change the height at which it spawns. So we'll go into location distribution, and we want to change the minimum Z value to 15 and the maximum Z value to, let's say, 25. We'll have a look at that in the editor. That's looking much better. So now the smoke's sort of emitting from just above the flame. Now there's another cool thing we can do in Cascade, which is called a delay. And what the delay is going to allow us to do is emulate the sort of build-up time that it takes to start emitting smoke from a fire. So if we just go to, I believe it's in required, we can scroll down and find the delay node, and we can put on a delay of, say, 6 seconds. And now you can see the fire starts up, and after 6 seconds the smoke spawns as well. Although it's very important that you tick this box here, which is for delay first loop only. What that means is at the moment it's putting that delay in every loop cycle of the emitters, so the smoke's gonna have that build up time every single loop. So if we tick this box, it'll only happen once the emitter is activated, and then as soon as the smoke comes in, it'll stay there. Now you may have noticed as well, the smoke is unusually bright. Normally smoke from a fire wouldn't be grey or white. So I'll just quickly hop back to Photoshop, and we can just darken the RGB layer There we go. It's not so odd looking anymore. We could possibly even thicken up this smoke a bit. So we can do that by heading back into the emitter. And we can increase the initial size, pop it back up to where it was before. It's got 50 for minimum, 100 for maximum. And we might just double the lifetime as well, so that the smoke goes all the way up into the sky before it fades out. We'll see how that looks. So that's looking pretty good. I might just play around with the spawn amount. So at the moment we're spawning quite a few fog sprites, so I'll change the spawn constant rate to 2. That's looking pretty good, so we've got some variance there now. So now that we've got our fire and smoke done, we can move on to the sparks. So just head on over to CG Textures again, and what we're looking for is under Textures, Fire, and we're going to go into Fireworks this time. And we're looking for a set like this one that just has really basic ember textures. So I'll grab this in a small and drag that into Photoshop. Now, first thing to do is change the image size to 512 by 512. And rub out the edges until the edges are black. There we go. So now we just need to make our alpha texture. So we'll copy all this information. Actually, we'll just duplicate the layer. And we want to increase the contrast a bit. First we'll saturate it to get rid of all that color information. I'll go into the levels now and just to adjust it a little bit. So we've got to make sure that we've got total black in the background, and we'll try and bring forth some of this hidden detail. There we go. So we'll copy that, go into channels, create our alpha channel, paste in that layer, and there we go. I might just as well, before we save this, I'll go in and brighten up our ember texture just to make sure that our embers come through clearly. Get rid of some of that green. It's best if I use color balance for this. There we go. So we'll just import our embers texture into the engine, and of course make a material for it. So I'll just copy the smoke material and just plug in our new ember texture into the texture sample slot. So what we can do now is jump into the emitter. We will duplicate one of the fire emitters, and with our embers material selected, we can chuck it in the slot, and we should start seeing some embers fly up. Here we go. That looks pretty cool. So with our embers, we sort of want them to act a little bit like the smoke. So what we'll do is add in a initial location node, put that to 2515 for the Z heights. So our embers are now coming out just at the top of the flame. We might increase the lifetime as well. Just double that. That's looking really nice. Got lovely embers coming out now. Let's have a look at that in the engine. So just jump into Photoshop now. We can start a new document, 512 by 512 pixels. And what we're going to do is put down a layer of black, chuck on a new layer. And we're just going to grab the brush tool with a soft brush. And we're just going to get a decent sized brush and sort of lay down a bunch of blobs on top of each other. What we're doing here is essentially making a blob mask, which is going to blur the pixels in our vision to simulate that heat distortion. So we want to get as much variance as possible, but it needs to remain soft in some way, so it can't be too harsh. So just play around until you get a nice balance. There we go, that's looking pretty good. So I'll just go into brightness and contrast and see if I can get a bit more contrast going. There we go. And finally I'll go into the filters, go into blur, and just use Gaussian blur to make sure there's no artifacting left. I just want it to be nice and soft. I'll just chuck on a last auto tone just to make sure. Oh, and of course go into levels and make sure that our black layer at the back is actually black. So that looks good. Now all we have to do is make our alpha channel. So we'll just duplicate this layer and just increase the contrast until the grey has turned to white or close to it. And I'm just going to bring the black back a bit so it doesn't have that clipping problem. And I'll blur it just a teeny bit. There we go. So I'll copy that into our alpha channel. And we can save this as a target and import it into the engine. And I'll make a copy of my smoke material. I'll insert my new heat texture into that texture sample slot. Now there's a few things we need to do in order to get the material working for the heat distortion. We're going to be using this distortion channel down here. So we should just be able to plug in the RGBA node into the distortion channel. I believe that's all we need to do. So I'll click save. And now if we grab the particle fire material and jump back into our cascade particle emitter, we'll just duplicate the smoke emitter, and we're going to plug our heat distortion texture into this one. Now let's just go back into the editor and we'll test, see if that's done anything. Seems to be working. And the only problem is, while it is distorting our view, it's also displaying the diffuse texture for the blur, and we don't actually want that to be visible at all, so we're going to have to find a way around that. Now I have a feeling all I've done wrong is if we head back into our heat material. Yeah, so we don't actually need this emissive slot at all, so we can delete all of that. I believe that's all we need, just the opacity and the distortion slot, so it's not actually displaying any diffuse texture at all. It's completely invisible other than the distortion effect. Let's see if that worked. There we go. Yeah, awesome. That's looking much better. In all honesty, the smoke is probably a bit too dark, but that's easily fixed. I think all around it's a pretty good fire particle, and hopefully yours is too after following this tutorial. So this has been the first part of the two-part series. In the next part I will show you how you can create some rain particle effects, and also convert the rain into snow and link it up so that the rain actually puts out the fire effect. So I hope you learned something in this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next one.